Hey folks, I'm Rob Franek, Editor-in-Chief here at the Princeton Review, and today we are sharing the top 8 concepts that you should know inside out, upside down to ace the AP Government and Politics exam come this spring. Now, the exam is designed to test your understanding of how the government operates within a political environment, so expect to see questions that test your knowledge of the federal government, political activities, civil rights, and the factors that influence public opinion and, of course, voting behavior. Let it wash over you, friends, but let us not waste a nanosecond more on pesky preamble. Let's drill down into those 8 concepts that you should tackle as you prepare for this mammoth exam. Concept number 1, my friends, 15 essential Supreme Court cases and 9 foundational documents. Friends, there are 15 essential Supreme Court cases that you should go above and beyond to familiarize yourself with, including Marbury versus Madison, Brown versus the Board of Education, Baker versus Carr, Roe versus Wade, and that is just to name a few. Now, these cases will serve as primary sources throughout the exam. You will also need to know 9 foundational documents: the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution of the United States, the Federalist Papers, specifically numbers 10, 51, 70, and 78, Brutus number 1, and of course Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. Understanding the main ideas in each of these documents will be crucial to your success, as you can nearly guarantee that they will be referenced on the exam come test day. That leads me to concept number 2, constitutional underpinnings. Folks, the questions here pop right off the page. Why did the Articles of Confederation fail? Why did the framers create a federal system of government? These are the questions that you should be able to succinctly answer on exam day. You'll want to understand, of course, the factors and the influences that led to the formation of the U.S. government. This means knowing about the key philosophers who influenced the framers, and these names will become all too familiar to you come springtime, my friends. Hobbes, Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau. You should also understand the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation and why the Articles couldn't serve as a viable governing constitution. You'll also want to know what took place during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787 and the infamous 3/5 Compromise. And of course, you'll need to know how the Constitution functions as an instrument of government. Friends, aim to remember all 27 amendments by era: the Bill of Rights, the early amendments, the Civil War amendments, the Progressive Era amendments, and the latter amendments. Leads me on to concept number 3, public opinion and media. The College Board will also test your understanding of public opinion, specifically how it's measured and the role that media plays in shaping it. As such, you'll want to understand the 3 characteristics of public opinion: saliency, intensity, and stability. You'll also need to know the key terms like random sampling, exit polls, and polling accuracy to understand how pollsters gather the data that politicians use to make key decisions. Aside from polls, you should know about political ideologies. There are 3 broad political ideologies in America today: conservative, liberal, and moderate. Know which factors tend to lead to which ideologies. And finally, the College Board, the creators of all things AP, expects you to understand what it means to create a public agenda that is a major role that the media plays in government perception. Concept number 4, linkage institution. Now, friends, few political acts are the work of a single person. Most politically active people work in groups to achieve shared political goals. Thus, the AP US Government Politics exam expects you to know about the 4 types of linkage institutions: political parties, interest groups, political action committees, PACs, and 527 groups. Understand the many functions that political parties serve: recruiting and funding candidates, running the government, and educating voters. And be sure to understand the ideological differences between the parties. You should also know how lobbyist groups function and the ways in which they aim to control the political process by hiring lobbyists to influence legislators. And lastly, make sure that you understand how labor unions form political action committees, again, PACs, to fund candidates, and how 527 groups avoid Federal Election Commission, that's the FEC regulation, by registering as political organizations and not political committees, a source of intense contention. Leads me to concept number 5, and that is elections. Folks, you should know all about elections before test day. This means understanding the election cycle, the various types of primaries, and the steps needed to secure a presidential nomination. And of course, a successful presidential campaign requires much more than just a charming candidate. It requires serious dollars. So be sure to understand how campaigns are funded. You should also understand what it takes to win a presidential election. Presidential candidates must win each state's electors, which in most states is done by getting a plurality of all the votes in that state. So familiarize yourself with how the Electoral College works and why candidates spend so much time vying for votes in swing and battleground states. Concept number 6, my friends, interactions among branches of government. It is essential to understand the 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, and of course judicial, and how each branch functions and interacts with each other. To begin, you'll want to understand how Congress works as a bicameral house, or a bicameral system. That's a 2-house legislature. It's split, of course, into the Senate, in which all states receive equal representation, and the House of Representatives, in which representation is proportionate to population. Your job is to understand the numerous powers that Congress possesses, how a bill becomes a law, and of course the inner workings of congressional committees and leadership. You'll also need to understand the role of the president, including how the executive office of the president operates and how the power of the presidency has grown over the years. And finally, you should know about how the Supreme Court functions. Study the process by which a case makes its way to the Supreme Court and how the Supreme Court has the power to strike down state or federal laws deemed unconstitutional through judicial review. Concept number 7 is public policy and the 5 steps of policy making. Now, the exam will expect that students understand the nuances of policy making and the process therein. So familiarize yourself with the 5 steps of policy making, which include: number 1, defining the role of government; 2, agenda setting; 3, policy formulation and adoption; 4 is policy implementation; and finally 5 is policy evaluation. You should also be aware of the key areas of American public policy, including economic policy, trade policy, and domestic policy. Last on my list is concept number 8, and it is civil rights and civil liberties. Now, civil liberties are the protections enjoyed by all Americans from the abuse of government power, while civil rights describe protections from discrimination based on race or gender or sexual orientation or disability or other minority status. On exam day, you will need to know the history and the evolution of civil liberties as well as civil rights in the United States. So study the significance of the Bill of Rights and the protections it grants. In particular, you should master the details of the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of petitioning the government, freedom of assembly, and of course freedom of religion. You should familiarize yourself with the essential cases related to the First Amendment, including Schenck versus the United States, Tinker versus Des Moines, Engel versus Vitale, and the New York Times versus the United States. And while you're at it, study up on the essential cases related to the Second Amendment, as well as the essential cases to America's implied right to privacy, such as Roe versus Wade. And be familiar, of course, as we mentioned before, with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail as it relates to freedom of assembly and association, and also ensure that you know about the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, Jim Crow laws, the Equal Pay Act of 1963, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And friends, that is just a sampling. Woo! Folks, I hope that you enjoyed this quick but substantive overview in today's video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up and leave us a comment. For all of you planning to take this year's AP Government and Politics exam, please know that we highly, highly recommend our AP prep books at the Princeton Review. And please know that all of us here are cheering you on. We're here to support you every step of the way. And as always, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to our channel for the latest updates on standardized tests and college admission and study tips and much, much more. Thanks as always for watching. Rob Pranik, Editor-in-Chief, signing off for today. Be well, friends.